We're honoured indeed to have property royalty here in the studio and over the phone. This is Alan Waxman from Landmass in London. Just to give people an understanding, Alan is one of London's most high-profile property designers and developers, and actually has been credited with transforming the lower ground floors of much of prime central London, especially in Belgravia and Knightsbridge. And dare I say, you've even been nicknamed the Mole as well, Alan. Great to have you on. On the back of this, how has Landmass come into being? What's your background and why this sort of angle, certainly what you've been known for more recently in terms of the lower ground floor side of things?
Good morning, Alex, and thank you very much for the very kind introduction. I think that when anybody starts any career, they never really know how it's going to end up. And the same with my journey through property, because when I started, my only ambition was to buy a few rental properties, starting in Fulham, then Walworth, then Brixton, Clapham, etc., and had nothing to do with actually doing anything about design or indeed building any basements. But what happened was I started, as I said, to build up this portfolio. Then I couldn't get the rental incomes I wanted on one or two of them, so I thought, well, maybe I can sell them for a profit. Managed to do that, having just given them a lick of paint and a clean-up. And then I thought, well, why not buy something in order to redevelop and see if I can do that as well. And I bought a couple of floors above an off-license in Fulham on a very busy road called Wandsworth Bridge Road.
Yeah.
And during the design process, because I wasn't sure how it would sort of pan out, I actually moved the kitchen 3 times, which obviously cost me a lot of money with the builder, but the end result was the flow was good, and I got it checked by a feng shui lady, because I was curious to see what professionals would think.
Yeah.
And she liked it, and it was the first time that I actually got a higher than expected price from the agents because of what we did.
Right.
And then following on from that, I bought a couple of flats in Notting Hill, which were existing 2-bed flats, and most developers would have perhaps tried to convert them into 3-bed flats. But I really had a big look at the space, and I really thought that once again, how we use the space is so important, and decided to make them into 1-bed flats.
Wow, so you went completely the other direction to most people.
Absolutely, yes. And then Sienna Miller, the actress, bought one of them. Somebody else bought the other. And again, we beat the market expectations because I started to understand that the people really appreciated good space, good planning. And I got a feeling of a thing called emotional purchase, where people, walk in and go, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and they fall in love with it. And I mean, you're very much renowned for transforming, in particular, lower ground floors and going down, I think, a number of stories going underground. How do you go about transforming what is effectively a windowless lower ground floor dark basement into something that actually sets the property apart and make it excel and obviously get that end result and that end buyer?
Well, the interesting thing about the lower ground is if you just look at the floor plate, what's interesting, you only have the steps going down. You don't have any, obviously, steps going further down because they don't exist. So actually, as against, the other floors, the staircase takes up less room. And so that in turn gives you a much bigger space to work with and also greater opportunity for having the whole space open plan. So that's just talking about the floor plate.
Yeah.
The second thing is crucial for these types of floors is ceiling height. And we've done anything from 2.75 in my latest project in Notting Hill to 3.4. And interestingly, in Notting Hill, because we'd done the plans some time ago, I didn't realize during the construction phase that the ceiling heights were only 2.5 meters. And so we actually had to go back to planning to get that extra 25 centimeters. And also that meant another party wall award. And it also obviously meant digging down further and costing more, taking more time. But that extra 25 centimeters per floor actually made a massive difference, and I'm a great believer of turning the negatives to a positive. The next thing, obviously, is how you can introduce natural light. In one project where it was a muse house and it just had windows at the front, and so everybody who looked at it thought, well, how dark and dingy it was, because it had houses on the other three sides. But what I did is I took out one of the back corners of the property, put in a glass retractable roof, and then a 10-meter copper waterfall going all the way down into a Zen garden. And again, that transformed the negative to a positive. So when people walked in, they were, wow, I wasn't expecting to see that. And then amongst the space in the lower ground floor, we also had additional voids. So in essence, double height ceilings to create that special atmosphere. I don't know if that gives you a flavor. And in another property, I put a floor-to-ceiling copper fireplace in the lower ground floor. So, there's lots of things you can do. So when people go down, they think, wow, I wasn't expecting to see that, and different ways to turn the negative to a positive.
And as you said, just coming in from a completely different angle, and as you said, doing something, I suppose, that's unexpected. And I think that's really what propels your property and your expertise into another level. I think that's a fair comment. And what are people having in these lower ground floors, Alan? What is the space normally, or is it, if you can think of it, you can put it down there, sort of design at all or not?
Obviously, each property is different, and when I did in Belgravia, where we won Best in Interior Design in the country, we had a bedroom suite which had a steam room on it. We had a TV area. We had the Zen garden, and then we had sort of a laundry and wine cellar. In another one I did in Belgravia, it was just open plan kitchen dining and a bit of a snug with a TV. The one which I've just done in Notting Hill, on the lower ground floor, what I'd done is I dropped the patio garden from ground to lower ground, so you could walk straight out from the kitchen dining snug out onto the terrace. So if you wanted to have al fresco dining, it was easy to sort out. And then the floor below in the basement, we had a TV room. We had 2 bedrooms both with ensuite, both looking out onto the patio, and we had a laundry room. So,
right, so a huge range of things. And I suppose you're an extremely experienced chap. And I mean, when you look to develop a property, what would you say your top tips in terms of just an insight on that angle?
I think the thing that people forget when they do the numbers on a property is, at the end of the day, the numbers only work if the end product is tip-top. And my company, Landmass, has sort of made a point of making sure that each and every property that we bring to the market, for where it is and what it is, ticks all the boxes. Because if it doesn't, the initial financial appraisal you do, you might as well put it in the bin.
Yeah.
And it's very binary in the higher end of the market, because if people don't like it, they don't then negotiate on the price. They just say, thanks, but not for us. And it's a little bit like in Little Britain when they go into the travel agent and they want to go away somewhere, and the person behind the desk says, sorry, computer says no. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So you've got to get the product right, and on that, it's nothing to do with the finishes. It's all to do with how you create the space. But the 3 main things, on your appraisal are obviously your sales price, working out what you think you can sell it for.
Yeah.
Secondly is your construction and professional fees, which will obviously vary from project to project, and to get realistic numbers for that. The contingency is always a red herring because it's always used up, so you may want to add a little bit on top of that. And then, of course, the timeline, because obviously each project's different, and timeline obviously affects the financials insofar as the interest costs. Once you've determined those, you then work out what your profit margin wants to be, because everybody has their own formula for that.
Yeah.
And if it's all cash, then that's all straightforward. If you're going to use bank debt, put those numbers in. And then what that in turn does, it then spits out what you can afford to pay for it.
Yeah, quite. So it's a lot more methodical and calculated.
Exactly. So in essence, what you're doing is you're working backwards from the end price, your costs, your timeline, put in your financial costs, put in your margin, and then work out what you can afford to pay for it.
All makes sense on paper, of course, doesn't it? But I guess in the real world it may be sometimes slightly different. And as you said, you just need to make a very precise judgment call. I think you're very good indeed on the interior design side of things. And I think very often when you're talking about the sort of the light wells and the Zen gardens, it's very much sort of interior design led, and the final sort of touch and the feel of it.
If it's done properly, especially complemented with the same flooring throughout, it does give that feeling of space. Now, it's not as easy as it sounds because the way we go about it, depending on the property, because each one has different light, we'll look at different shades of white, different times of the day, different rooms in the house, and then different textures of paint. So what we then come up with is something that works best for the property in that location.
What do you feel currently defines luxury in homes at the moment? There's a lot of sort of, say, specialists in inverted commas out there, but what is it? You're at the forefront of it, but what actually defines it? Is it that sort of bespoke touch to everything?
I think the main thing is, if you're doing a property to sell, is as a developer, when I look at my role, it's like being the conductor of the orchestra. And the challenge is putting the team together, and different designers have different egos and different views, and different architects the same. And so the skill of the developer is actually having the vision and then getting the team to follow that vision. And in every case, I've always had disagreements with the design team about what they want to do and what I want to have. And sometimes I've gone along with their ideas, and sometimes they've come along with my ideas. So it's something which you've got to lead from the front, and this really comes from either having the right eye or having the right eye and also experience. But I don't think there's a secret formula. It's just, some people either have it or they don't. And the main thing is that the dog wags the tail, not the tail wags the dog. So you have to, sometimes designers will come up with ideas which, they're super passionate about, but you have to say, well, I don't think that's what the client's going to want or the buyer's going to want.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because in essence, all we're doing is we're creating a widget to sell, and it happens to be a super luxury product. But if people walk in and don't like it, then they'll just walk out the door.
What are the actual rules, I suppose? Do you have any rules, dare I say, in your role when it actually comes to the interior and the actual finish of a particular project or property that you handle?
Yeah, I mean, Alex, at Landmass, we do follow a very strict process, and that is, if we're doing work for a client, obviously step one is to take the brief, understand what they want to achieve out of it. Then the second part is then coming up with design layout solutions, architectural design, which will hopefully give them things which they had never thought about, and looking at a property in a way which they didn't think was.
No, I've got to say, Alan, some fantastic tips and insights into your world. Really fascinating stuff. If anyone wanted to sort of see a bit more, I know you briefly mentioned the website, and to get in touch with you, what are the best ways?
Well, as I said, either the easiest way is through the website, which is Landmass, landmass.co.uk. If they want to email me directly, alan@landmass.co.uk.
Fantastic. I can't thank you enough again, Alan, and really appreciate your time.